I enjoyed watching it as a whole because I enjoy Christopher Nolan's. I always enjoy the level of craft that he brings to movies.
Yes.
And so I enjoyed watching it. I would never watch this movie again for sheer enjoyment, but I will probably watch it at least one more time just now that I have talked about it and stuff. I'll probably revisit it to see if I maybe enjoy it more a second time. But I don't know.
How would you rate it out of 10?
Oh man. To me it's like a 4 out of 10 probably. Yeah.
I know I might seem timid. My heart just ain't been in it. I can't trust who's around.
Welcome to Tone Deaf, a conversation podcast. Here we are, episode 13. We made it to episode 13. Today I'm going to talk about a couple things. I'm going to try to start doing this pod a little bit differently. And what I mean by that is trying to create a little bit more structure. So, I like the freedom because, there's a reason why I created this as a conversational podcast because I didn't want the typical like talk show type things, and I didn't want the TMZ, hey, I'm just going to talk about whatever's current type thing. I mean, I do want to be current as in wanting to give my opinion on things that happened in the film world, but I don't want to be like a TV show, like hey, and here we have this, and then here's, but I did want to create a little bit more order, potentially segments. I don't have it again. Like I'm feeling this out as I'm going, and I'm using you all as guinea pigs to an extent. So as you get to know me, I'm also figuring out how to best serve you, if that makes sense. So So today, I want to talk about a couple things. This is why I don't like to be too scripted, because I like for the conversation to be able to flow if it does flow. But I did want to talk about two films specifically. I wanted to talk about Tenet. I'm late to Tenet, but I finally saw it. I finally caught Tenet. And I want to talk about Tenet. I want to talk about Nolan. And I also want to talk about John David Washington, and all things related. And I also want to talk about the recent release of Disney Pixar's Soul. Also today, along with trying to do things a little bit different, I'm also going to be having some call-ins. So I know I like to have when I am with someone, I like to have them here in the room. There's a different, vibe. But, with COVID and schedules and all the things combined, I figured I would use the technology that I have, available to me. So we're going to call in. So I want to hit up my man Ahsohn. He was on not too long ago. I forget the episode. It might have been episode 7. And we talked about Star Wars and sequels. And me and him talked a little bit, not too long. We didn't get too deep into it. So the conversation you're going to hear from us is very, it's new, it's authentic. We haven't gone over this together, but I know he has some opinions, about the movie Tenet. And I'm interested to hear what he has to say. And then a little bit later, I'm going to talk to my man, Richard Blacksher. And we're going to talk about Disney Pixar's Soul, which highlights a black, nearly middle-aged man. I don't know if they say his age, who is a musician and who's experiencing an existential crisis. And I believe Richard Blacksher would say that he is too, a middle-aged man who is a musician and is experiencing an existential crisis. So I feel like he's a perfect guy to give his insight on that movie as well. So hopefully this all flows right. I'm trying this all for the first time, so I'm gonna call my man from the weekly regular podcast, Ahsohn Williams. So let's see. Ahsohn.
Yo, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you swell.
All right.
So,
sounds good.
Yes, how are you doing?
I'm great, bro.
I was just talking about the beauty of technology, and that we don't all have to be in the same room for this stuff to work. And I figured I would use the technology that I have to hopefully be able to expand with more people, especially with us being in the middle of a pandemic and people having lives and things like that, and not always able to be able to sit next to people. So
100%.
this is a debut. Matter of fact, after I talk with you, there's another call in that I'm going to do. So this is an episode of firsts for me.
Well, congratulations.
I appreciate that. Okay. So I gave a little intro, a little spiel.
Okay.
I was late to the party. I think you were too, because I think I saw as you were doing your Instagram stories. I think both of us fairly recently were watched, however you want to say it, Christopher Nolan's Tenet. So I think for both of us, it's fresh. I got a chance to watch it like 2.5 times. I tried to watch it a third time and I fell asleep on it. Not because it's boring, but because I have kids and I can only watch movies at night. And then I fell asleep on the movie. But I posted on Facebook, and your initial response to me was, let's do a pod about it. So I know you have things to say, and I purposely didn't want to talk to you about them because I wanted our conversation today to be organic. So I will let you have the floor. I don't really have a way that I want to. There's no specific way I want to break this down. So I guess we could just kind of rant about it in the most orderly way possible, I guess. So
yeah. So I watched Tenet. And I guess a little bit about that movie. I talked about this on my podcast, but it's a movie that I enjoyed watching it, but I don't think that it accomplishes exactly what it set out to do. I think it's there's basically now a Christopher Nolan template for like for the movies that he tries to make, that, you know, outside of like the Batman movies, obviously, but there's like a Christopher Nolan template, and I feel like Tenet was it was like full Chris Nolan at 100, you know what I'm saying, with no sort of like no thought or care as to how the audience would like experience of the movie was going to be, because like within the first 10 to 15 minutes of the movie, like I remember tweeting, I'm like, this is the most infuriating movie I've ever seen. and not because it was so bad yet, because honestly the first act of the movie is not terrible, but it's infuriating because, you know, when Inception came out, a common thing you hear about Christopher Nolan movies is that they don't hold your hand, right?
Yes.
They just kind of immerse you in whatever the story is, and they
it's
kind
up
of
to you.
leave you to
It's up to you to
out.
catch up.
Right. This movie is probably the most blatant example of that, and it's so much so that it almost feels like it feels like he's trying to like punk the audience. Like, I'm gonna make a movie that's so confusing and so like impossible to follow that like people would just walk out of the theater. Like, if this movie, if people were at the movie theaters like normal when this movie came out, I think a lot of people would have walked out of this movie. Because I was going into this movie prepared for like the worst in terms of like the most convoluted, complicated movie. And even I was like, yo, like there's so many questions that I have that the movie clearly has no interest in answering. And so yeah, it was really infuriating. So I mean, I enjoyed watching it as a whole because I enjoy Christopher Nolan's I always enjoy the level of craft that he brings to movies.
Yes.
And so I enjoyed watching it. I would never watch this movie again for sheer enjoyment, but I will probably watch it at least one more time just now that I have talked about it and stuff. I'll probably revisit it to see if I maybe enjoy it more a second time. But I don't know.
How would you rate it out of 10?
Oh man. To me it's like a 4 out of 10 probably. Yeah.
I was expecting you to say like 6.5.
well, here's the thing. Here's this movie could have been. So there are two. I think Wonder Woman 84 and Tenet have a lot in common.
Okay. Slow down.
All right,
because I haven't seen Wonder Woman. Partly, and I will almost blame you because I also saw the way you broke down the movie amongst other people. And no one was particularly excited about having seen it. Like no one was like, "Wow, you got to go watch." Like I know, like I'm a person that is not the biggest fan of like the critic industry as a whole. Like I don't think that you should watch a movie because Rotten Tomatoes told you should watch a movie, but but there are people who I respect enough to where if they say watch this, that it's worth my time and money. So I haven't seen anybody who I respect say you gotta go see it. All I've seen are people like slightly defending the people who say it was bad, but nobody has really come out speaking glowingly about it, which again, like I have HBO Max, so like I can go watch this tonight when this podcast is up. But I feel like if 2020 taught us anything is that our time is valuable, and I don't even know if I want to give 2 hours of my time to this movie.
Yeah, no, I get that. I would agree. I would never, after watching Wonder Woman 84, I would never tell anyone to just casually watch the movie for their enjoyment. But as someone who is just particular to this conversation, I think it would be, since you've seen Tenet, I think it would be interesting for you to watch Wonder Woman.
Okay.
Because, and I'll talk about it in a way that doesn't spoil Wonder Woman for you, but Tenet, I am perfectly. I'm the type of person where I think Tenet and Wonder Woman could have been like amazing movies. Like they were, and I don't think that they were far from it. So that's probably the most controversial thing I'm gonna say the whole time I'm on this podcast. But so Big, right? The Tom Hanks movie Big is one of my favorite movies, right? And that movie is like a quintessential kind of 80s movie, right down to the fact that like there's a magic element of the movie that's never really explained. It just is magic and you have to accept that. And then that is used as a way to tell a story about characters that you care about. And there's a lot of questions about the way the world works and like the different things that they set up for the purposes of jokes and stuff like that, where if you were to pull at those threads, it would all come tumbling apart. But because you like the character so much and you resonate with the character so much and you resonate with the journey that they're on, the emotional resonance that you feel at the end of the movie, you don't even care about any of those questions because that's not what the movie is about. And I think Wonder Woman was pretending to be that kind of movie, but they never went all the way with it. And I think Tenet, even though Christopher Nolan typically makes, and this is why I think Tenet is so confusing, Christopher Nolan typically makes movies that are similar in a way that they have a magical element to them that where if you start to ask all the questions, it'll unravel. But he typically is clever enough to where he will answer some of those questions, but in a way that serves the story. Like The Prestige is a good answer. Well, if I'm going to spoil The Prestige, how does the teleportation machine work? Like, that's crazy. Well, it makes a double of the person and one of them is killed. But that serves the story because it's ultimately about the Hugh Jackman character's obsession with being the best, right?
Yes.
Like he typically, when he attempts to Interstellar, like we don't need to understand why love is the one thing that can transcend space and time like gravity does, except that it helps to serve the story.
Okay, so
Like-
check this. I'm glad you
Go
bring
ahead.
that up because so I'm watching the movie with everybody else's comments. Nobody really talked about how good the movie was or how bad the
Tenet?
movie was. Yeah. People had only
Yeah.
talked about whether or not they could understand the plot. So I went into watching this movie. Like I had even rewound the beginning like 5 times only because like my kid had like walked in and I didn't want to miss anything because I felt like if I turn my head for a second, I'll miss something. So I was like eyes glued to the TV. And I think maybe 15 minutes into the movie when we're spoiling it. So I guess anybody who's watching this and hasn't seen the movie yet, this is the time to turn away. But when John's character goes into that one building and he's got the clipboard and that jacket and he meets with that doctor, I don't know what she was, a scientist or whatever. And it's so funny because I feel like and this is where I agree with you. I feel like he knew that he was just here to mess with our heads because when she's explaining Tenet to John's character, she literally says to him, "Don't try to understand it, just feel it." And I was like,
Yeah.
I literally, like, to my head, I said, all right. I laughed because I was like he knows that he's trying to mess with us. So it's like, you know what? The funny thing is I then, because she said it, I turned off my like hypercritical thinking cap and just started watching it after that, which maybe helped me enjoy it a little bit more than I intended to. But yeah, I'm okay with you not telling me, like, this is the movies, so everything that you do, I understand this is not like super real life. So I'm okay with you doing something that breaks the natural law or that goes beyond what we're capable of proving or whatever. I'm okay with that because it's a movie. You know, I'm okay with watching Pulp Fiction and not knowing what's inside the briefcase. That's okay because it's not important. It's not important to the movie. You just got to know that what they were going after was very important, and that's enough. And it's like, fine, okay. I'll even though it would be cool to know what's in there, it's fun to have discussions about what we think is in there. The plot doesn't fall apart because of it, and it's okay to have those little "it's my only secret" type things. You know, that he holds with the audience. But okay, I'll say this to you before I kick it back to you. Have you done Clubhouse?
Nah, I haven't done it yet.
So a friend of mine invited me to Clubhouse. I finally started maybe like a week or two ago. And the first room that I get invited to, believe it or not, is a Tarantino versus Christopher Nolan debate.
Oh, that's funny.
So I'm gonna kick it back to you.
Okay.
As you kind of go through moments of the movie that bothered you or whatever, and I'm gonna try to beat, because there were a few Nolan guys in there who picked Nolan over Tarantino, and of course Tenet came up. So I'm gonna try to play the devil's advocate,
okay,
and repeating the arguments that I heard from them, who actually enjoyed the movie and thought it was a good movie, and enjoy most of his storytelling techniques.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So I think that's an interesting debate. The Tarantino Nolan debate is very interesting because I think Tarantino succeeds in exactly the way that I'm about to explain, where Nolan fails at this movie.
Yes.
So most Nolan movies, like I said, there's a magic element to it, and where most movies like from the 80s and stuff like that, or like in Wonder Woman, they don't bother to explain the magic because it's not about that, it's about the characters. Nolan typically will explain the magic of it and then use that explanation to inform the story and the characters and how we feel about it. In Tenet, exactly how you said, it seems like he's about to do the opposite of that. In which it was interesting to me when she says don't think about it, it's just, feel it or whatever. I'm like, okay, Nolan, I see what you're doing. You're subverting the expectations of the audience. They expect you to go through every detail of how this works, and then that'll make the ending more meaningful. The nuts and bolts of it will make the ending more meaningful. Except so, and instead of doing that, you're gonna ignore the details and just tell a story with a piece of magic in it, and kind of undo the Nolan trope.
Yeah.
Except, and he tries to do that, except he ends up bogging down in all of the nuts and bolts anyway, because he clearly finds that aspect of it more interesting. And so by the time we get to the end of the movie, he tries to have the ending of the more 80s-y kind of movie where he doesn't explain the details of it and just lets the emotions of the characters work on you. Except we've spent 2.5 hours only literally ever dealing with the nuts and bolts of it. So by the time we get to the end of the movie, when it's time to have the Robert Pattinson, John David Washington sort of like, man, it doesn't matter how all of this worked, but it's crazy that we're friends, right? I love you, dog. Like, so when in a movie where he actually did not get into the nuts and bolts and just let it be about their friendship and their relationship, like, that would have meant a lot more. But the ending just feels kind of tacked on. It feels kind of like it's the moment is not as resonant as it should have been. And I think ultimately that's where the movie fails, because the movie ultimately isn't really about anything the way a lot of his more successful movies are. Like, the movie has a plot and there's events that take place, but like, there's no real, there's no theme of the movie. There's no well, this theme is all about John David Washington's character at realizing that blah blah blah. No, it's not that. Like, he literally always was the person who's the hero of the movie. He's literally called the protagonist. He's always the protagonist, literally, because of the way the time works in the movie. He's the one who set all the events in motion. So he's literally at he's literally at the end of his character arc from moment one of the beginning of the movie.
I think he even refers to himself as the protagonist.
Yeah, he says in a scene, he's like, I'm the protagonist of this movie. I'm just like, this is wild. So like, there's
go ahead.
Because he's literally already completed that journey. You know what I'm saying?
It felt like, I agree. It felt like at the end of the movie, it was kind of like, okay, so here was why you should have cared about this guy. And it's like, you waited until 2.5 hours to tell me who this guy was. And like the problem, so this is a case in which the character himself was not a person that I found myself being like vested in. Like, I didn't feel emotionally attached. I can't even think of the name of his character. I was attached to John David Washington, the person.
Yeah.
And I was attached to seeing how he would perform. And before I let you go, I do want to talk a little bit about him specifically.
Sure.
But that'll be a little bit more separate, because I have nicer things to say about him than I do about the movie as a whole. But I'm watching because I want to see what John David Washington does. I wasn't necessarily watching because I want to see how his character ends. And I agree with you about the plot. It's like, when I think about even something like Dunkirk, which I think that's his best movie, because
wow, it's a big statement.
He took I think part of it is because I'm like a big history buff, so I already knew about Dunkirk, and when I first heard about the idea of it being done, I'm like, wow, we've never seen anybody tell a story about a battle that was lost. Like, how do you tell a compelling story about an army that lost? Like, that's really what it's about. They lost and managed to get their guys out before they were annihilated, which is the story, because they were able to re-up. So it's like, I appreciate it. He made me feel for the people. Like, I could feel their distress. I could feel, and it's the way that, of course, he's always had fantastic scoring, and Hans is just always able. It seems like the two of them, like kind of like Shaq and Kobe, and it seems like Hans can get us to feel those moments. Even like with the way that he crafted the Joker theme, music, sound, whatever, he's always been able to do that. So I think just with the way that the story, it just made me feel for his characters. And I'm trying to think about, like, every other movie of his, I've always felt invested in a character. And in this movie, I found myself really not caring what happened to anybody.
Right.
Like, I didn't care at all. Like, if this person died, oh well. I'm just trying to understand what the hell is going on. And maybe that was the red herring. Hey, look over here, so that I don't really have to invest much in developing the character. Just look at this really, trippy plot line, and maybe that will distract you. And I have to say, to an extent, I did find myself so much trying to understand just where I was that I wasn't necessarily paying attention to the characters. And I
Right.
guess that was his intention. But what one of the strongest Nolan defenders in that particular clubhouse that I was in was saying was, and he was saying this, it almost seemed like he wasn't a big Tarantino fan. And he was like, he said this as like a dig as well towards Tarantino. Is like, he was like, well, I'm sorry that Nolan doesn't feel like he has to hold your hand through the movie. And I'm like, okay, yes, I am an adult, and I don't need you to tell me that the sky is blue. Just show it to me and I'll figure it out. But I am trusting you to tell me where the hell I need to go. And if I feel like you're just saying, here, figure it out for yourself, then it's kind of like, and it makes me feel like, did you care that I care? Because if you don't even care that I care about it, then why would I care about it? And,
Right.
we're not here to talk about Tarantino, but Tarantino wants you to know where you are. And it's funny because both of them engage often in linear timelines. Like, both of them have a habit of going back and forth, and even like with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, even though that was a linear storyline, there's flashbacks and there's moments where, like with Bruce Lee, where there's like, was that a real moment, or was that just Booth imagining? But you find yourself not caring because you're in good hands. Like, Tarantino's gonna take you there, and he's gonna give you a satisfying ending, so you're okay with the trippy ride. And I found myself just kind of irritated at the end of the movie. Like, I was proud of myself because I felt like, and I don't know if I said this, I actually understood the plot. So I was like, yeah, okay, I understood what's happening. And then after that, I was like, okay, but it didn't have any depth to it. Like, there was no emotional depth to it at all. Like, I kind of wanted the mom to get her kid back, but I didn't even really care that much because I didn't even never see the kid. So I'm like, I don't even know who the kid is. And the kid could be I don't know. Like, why should I even care that he gets the kid back, So, yeah, I don't know. That's the one defense that I heard, was that it's not up to him to tell you everything. That's, he's leaving. He doesn't have to walk you through everything, but I'm like, but even when you look at his other movies where he does do that, he still gives you something. Like, we don't have to see Batman escaping the Batmobile the Bat, or whatever it was called, after the atom bomb went off. We didn't have to see that, but you piece that together by saying, oh, Bruce Wayne fixed the autopilot, and and then you can give us you don't have to put the puzzle together, but you can at least give us the pieces. But I felt like for this movie, I didn't even have all the pieces.
Yeah, I agree. But we could talk about John David though, if you want.
Let's.
I got some opinions.
I am off, and I will admit that I'm probably biased because he's black, and I'm just automatically rooting for black people. But I could get the sense, especially with the first fight scene. I think it was the first fight scene that took place in the kitchen of that restaurant. Yeah. And I got the sense, and even at the beginning when they were doing that siege on the opera house or whatever, you got the sense that he was actually an athlete. And the way he moved felt like he's actually doing this. And watching that, I was like, okay, I'm just about ready to like sign me up for anything John David Washington where he's doing action.
Yeah, yeah. No, I was just reading up about him right now. I didn't know he played pro football.
Played for yeah, he's an athlete. That's why I think the first time I seen him was in what was the TV show with The Rock? Ballers, and he played I think like a wide receiver. I don't remember if that's the actual position he played. I don't know if he was a wide receiver or a running back, but
looks like he played running back.
Yeah, so I knew when he was in ball. That's what I thought was interesting because he was already a football player and they brought him in to do that. So yeah, that you could tell like he's an athlete in the way that he moved, and I also appreciated that it didn't seem like he was trying to do a Denzel impersonation.
Yeah.
So what do you think about his prospects as an actor?
Yeah, I think he's got I mean, I just saw the trailer for the new movie he has with Zendaya.
Yes.
Called Malcolm and Marie, I think it's called.
Yes.
That looks phenomenal.
Yes, I can't wait.
I think as an actor, I think he's clearly a cut above most of these actors out here. The one thing, I think the first thing that jumped out about me in Tenet was his physicality.
Yeah.
I think there's been, what's funny is that even in his early days, there's something about Denzel's physicality I never quite buy all the way. Even when he was younger, like I just in my mind, Denzel just isn't like, especially when they have him do like The Equalizer and movies like that where he's supposed to be the most dangerous man in the world.
Yeah.
Like I never really buy that from him. Like he's obviously very good at being intense, but when it comes to like throwing punches and stuff like that, I never quite buy his physicality the way you would like, I don't know, somebody else in a role like that. But John David, like I instantly bought that. Like he just moves his body in a way that like it feels authentic and it feels real. Yeah, he's really good at that. I think he has inherited I think a little bit of his father's sort of intensity. Like he has this way of communicating on screen where like everything that he says, it almost seems like he's not reciting lines. Like I know that sounds cliche, but it's like he says everything that he says with such a genuine certainty. Like and I think that Denzel has that as well, where like even when he's playing that he's unsure about something, like he sounds so certain of what he's saying. Like there's no other line he could have said, which is why I'm sure why writers and directors like to have Denzel and then now John David in their movies reading their dialogue, because it sounds like it came from that person. You know what I'm saying? I think John David is great. He's I don't know, I want to see how tall he is, because he doesn't seem very tall, and they weren't doing him no favors casting that giant white lady.
Yes, I noticed that because in almost every scene he's in, he's like always the shorter person, which to me, I saw that, but still in the way that he moved and his physicality, he felt like he was larger, if that makes sense. Like he might have been a little 5'9", so so it might have been that he was shorter, but he was capable of taking care of himself and handling himself, which is what made me buy into him, But even the way that he moved, to me, it's just there was a swagger to it, and I agree with you about Denzel, which is why I think for like these Equalizer movies, I think that's why they're doing the type of action. It's like old man action. Right. It's like, I'm not like, this isn't like Jackie Chan running off walls. This is like,
no, it's all upper body.
Yeah, and this is like, I know your pressure points, and I'll just hit you once in the throat because I don't have time to. I don't know if I can run. I can't go 12 rounds with you. So
he ain't got the knees anymore.
Exactly. But I know the move to boom, boom, boom and get you out of my way. So it's like that grown man strength where it's like, you can't run with the kids, but like you could end it in one round if you got the opportunity. But
right. Yeah, I agree, bro. Yeah, so I'm right on board with you with John David. I think he's great. I think he was really good in Black Klansman. I think he was excellent in this. He's doing a lot of the. I mean, he is. I mean, jokingly, we said he's the protagonist of Tenet, but he does a lot of the because most of the other people in this movie are just kind of, because he's so fish out of water, everyone else kind of is very matter of fact about stuff, and they're kind of like, "Yeah, man, everything's going in reverse. Haven't you figured it out yet?" Like, like it's a lot of that. Like he keeps running into different people. They're like, "Yeah, man, catch up." Like, but and so he has to do a lot of the. He's both the protagonist and the hero of the movie, but he's also the audience surrogate. So he's carrying a lot of the drama and the emotion of the movie on his performance alone. And so I think he does a good job carrying that.
I noticed that from the beginning that like he is gonna be the surrogate through which I find out the information that I need, because it seems like he was the only one out of everybody in almost every scene that he's in that seemed like he didn't really know everything that was going on. Yeah. And it was like somebody else always knew. And then it was funny because then they played on all of the cliche time travel motifs. Right. Like, I can't tell you what's gonna happen because if I tell you, you're gonna do it differently, which reminds me of like the Endgame where Tony Stark asked Doctor Strange, like, you said there was one out of however million, is this the one? And he's like, if I tell you, you won't, blah blah blah. So it's like that whole thing, or like the grandfather effect, and they mentioned that a couple times. If you bend a blade of grass in the past and it changes the future and whatever. So I think there was a lot of presupposition on the part of Nolan in like, I'm just going to assume that you guys have at least a basic understanding of time travel based on the millions of movies who have done time travel. So I'm not even going to bother trying to explain what the hell is happening. I'm just going to do things weird and have action where people are moving backwards, which I have to say was actually interesting to watch, like the backwards fight scenes.
I think so, yeah.
But yeah, like you said, he is capable of crafting a movie quite well. So I don't think we are criticizing his ability to make movies. It just, I wonder if he's become like, if he's settled into, I'm only going to make movies like this from now on. Like have we seen his peak?
I don't know. I would like to see a Christopher Nolan movie that isn't one of these kinds of movies. I would like to see him, like, I'd like to see more Dunkirk type stuff.
Yeah.
From him. I don't know what his next project is, but I would love for it to be something that is, it doesn't have to be linear in terms of storytelling, but like, I just hope that it's not a big sci-fi thing again. Like, I kind of want it to be like I would love to see him do like a period piece of like, you know, some old like you know, King Arthur type movie or something like that, or like, you know, something where he can just really just show off his craft and not have to be, you know, not have the audience have to be distracted by all these different, you know, convoluted plot elements and stuff like that, you know. Okay, so I think he is a talented filmmaker. Yes, obviously.
Yes. So so I asked you two questions before I let you go. One, cool. Do you have a favorite Nolan movie?
I do have a favorite Nolan movie. What's your second question, or should you want me to answer that first?
My second question is kind of a response to the statement you just made. How do I phrase this? What is a genre that you would like Nolan to tackle? I know you mentioned period, but is there like, because it seems like he's always just doing like sci-fi action thriller. Yeah. Like, is there any other genre that he kind of like hasn't done yet that you would be interested in seeing how he interprets?
If not like a, you know, like sword and shield kind of like King Arthur movie, then I would like to see him maybe try to do like a Western. I think that might be good. I think that would be interesting to see a Western from him.
Other than Dunkirk, has he done a period piece?
Not that I know of. I don't think so.
Oh yeah, I'm just now thinking about that. I don't think there's really much else.
No, I don't think he has. Yeah, no, I don't think he has. I'm looking at his filmography. It doesn't look like it. So, or I mean, I guess The Prestige is a period piece.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's more of a fantasy movie in my mind, but because it's not like a real point in history, it's just like a kind of a fantastical history, you know. So yeah, I would like to see him do a Western. I think would be cool from him because he's really good at like, he obviously likes to make movies about, you know, men who are obsessed to the point that it like starts to ruin their life and whatever it is they're trying to do. And I think obsession works well in like a Western setting. So yeah, I think that would be cool. That and then do I have a favorite Nolan movie?
Yes.
So I always give I always give two answers when people ask me this. So I think my favorite Nolan movie, like I think his best movie is probably The Prestige.
Mm-hmm.
I think my favorite Nolan movie is probably, oh man, my favorite movie is either The Dark Knight or Interstellar because I rewatch those movies the most from him. But I think The Prestige is probably his best movie. Yeah, I think so. I think if you're looking for the Nolan template, like what Nolan does best, I think it is most on display in The Prestige. Yeah.
I'll buy that. I think for that same reason, that's why I appreciated Dunkirk.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the way he tells the story, and honestly, the first time I saw the movie, I didn't even understand the timeline, but it didn't bother me.
Right.
And it wasn't until I went back and watched it again that's like, oh, he's like replaying the same events. Like, I think he broke it down into like a week, a day, an hour, and it was like, so he would tell a story and then go back and then tell it again with a little bit more detail and then go back and then tell it again with even more detail, you know. So
right.
But he did it in a way that wasn't like a, hey, screw you, good luck trying to figure it out. He did it in an interesting way while still being able to capture, you know, the emotional depth and trying to get me to care about the people in there. So
totally.
I think I'm gonna give Tenet one more watch, at least like critically. And then to see if maybe I feel a little bit different because it's been about a week since I've seen it. So having, you know, let it after it's kind of sat and then try to watch it again and maybe I'll see if there's anything I feel like I've missed or whatever. But yeah, I appreciate your insight, your opinions.
Absolutely. Yeah, man, I appreciate you having me. I always love talking about movies and coming on this show and chopping it up with you. Yeah, I had a good time.
Of course, man. I'll holler at you soon.
All right, sounds good, man.
All right, man. Take it easy.
Later.
Okay. Yeah. I think I would still say go see Tenet. Go see it. It's a thing where I would, because it's a movie where I'm interested in seeing how other people process it. So it's definitely not a movie where I'm going to say don't watch it. I'm definitely asking you to watch it. If you haven't seen it yet, well, we kind of spoiled the hell out of it. So if you haven't seen, I mean, we didn't actually go into too much detail about what the specific plot is and what it is that they're trying to accomplish. But again, I think we were just talking about general Nolan motifs, which it's very present in this movie. So if you know anything about Nolan, then you kind of have generally the idea of what type of trip you're going to be on. So, yeah. So, okay. Because I have a child, I have now seen the movie Soul about 10 different times. Literally 10 different times. It's just on replay. He loves the movie. But one of the things that was capturing to me is that because so when I say I've seen it 10 times, I don't really mean 10 times. I've probably seen it twice. But what I mean is like it's on in the house. So I've seen several scenes over and over and I can hear it in the background. So I'm pretty familiar with the way the movie goes. But when I watched it, I was quite taken aback because it felt like the least kid movie that Disney Pixar has ever done. I mean, we're talking about a middle-aged man dealing with a midlife existential identity crisis, and it's surrounded around the topic of death. And I'm like, yo, is this supposed to be for like 8-year-olds? Like, do they even know what the hell is going on? But yeah, so let me see if he's available. I'm gonna holler at the man himself. He was also on the podcast before, when we talked about superhero movies. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit at my man Richard Blacksher. And let's see if he I told him I was calling in. Let's see if he answers. So hopefully he answers. Just like the yeah, what's up, man?
Hello.
Hello. Okay, cool. So I just had Ahsohn on. We talked about Tenet.
Boo.
So
Ahsohn.
Yeah, so we talked about Tenet for a little bit. But yeah, so I gave a little intro. I said how I feel like I've seen Soul like 10 different times. Where like I've only really seen it twice. But because you have a kid too, and if they're watching a movie, that means it's on, and it's on in the house, which means you're hearing it. So I may not have watched it 10 times, but like it's been on. It's been on enough, yes, that I've walked past and seen it on TV or heard dialogue or whatever enough to where I feel like it's been almost like 10, like I've watched it like 10 times.
That's still Spider-Verse for me, but yeah.
Yes. So what was trippy about it though is I was watching this movie and I was like, yo, what the hell is this for kids? And not because it was vulgar. It wasn't vulgar. It wasn't anything like that. It was just
the subject matter is definitely not for kids.
It's talking about a middle-aged man going through a midlife existential identity crisis.
Yes.
And the vehicle in which they dive into that is death.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yo, this is Disney Pixar.
Yeah.
So,
which I just want to point out, always affirms that I'm ahead of the curve because, I mean, it's literally, what I do.
Well, okay, so that's why I wanted you on, because I know you've seen it. Plus, I know that you are also you're not quite middle-aged, but
I feel like it every day.
Man that is in one way or another going through existential and identity crises. What's crisis plural? Crises.
Yeah.
About music.
Yeah.
And I think all of us that are creatives and people who are watching, I think all of us at one point or another, maybe I don't know do you ever get rid of it? I don't think you ever get rid of it, but the idea of like this thing feels it's so visceral for us that it feels like, and to borrow from the movie, like it feels like this is our spark, like this is what we're meant to do. But on the flip, we are having to not have our identity so tightly wound up in it that if it doesn't turn out the way that we want it to, that then we are lost ourselves. Yes. So it's trying to find meaning in life that's outside of it, but how do you when you love a thing so much? So I'll let you
I was gonna say,
explain. I'll let you explain. Well, I'm gonna let you explain via your own personal experiences / your interpretation of the movie, how it struck you, what you found interesting about the movie. I think both of us agreed that it's a fantastic movie. So
right.
I don't think we're really actually gonna be critical of the movie in that sense. I think we'll be talking about it more in its relatability, if that makes sense.
Right.
So
No,
yeah.
definitely. Was that my segue?
Yes, that was my way of saying here. Take it. I'm passing you the baton.
All right, for sure. I'll try to take this a little bit more seriously than I usually do. Your last one.
Well, it's Disney Pixar, so we don't have to be that serious. I mean, we're talking about death.
Oh, but we're talking exactly. This is, I mean,
death, literally death.
We talk about death, but this is like there's a joke for English majors that any writer will always say that anything that they write is about death, which is true.
Yeah.
Any great work, any literature period, it's all about death. So, so I'll speak to that first. When we look at like Soul, it's not just about, Joe, the main character, Joe, it's not about his literal death and him trying to become alive again. It's about, what happens when, to quote Langston Hughes, when your dream gets deferred. And even just that opening scene, the very opening notes when you see the Disney, when you see the Tinkerbell crawl, and you hear the middle school band playing. I work in a middle school, and I've sat on many times. The music teacher and I are pretty good friends, and I've sat in plenty times just listening to the middle school students play. They're not that bad. We have a really good middle school band, but I've been in rooms. I've been in those situations when you're hearing, when you're a musician and you've put all these amount of years of work into something, and then you hear somebody who's brand new and just doesn't take it seriously. That's a little death. So you see all these little things that, kind of are killing Joe up until the point where he, lands the gig. And even that first, that him playing with Angela Bassett's character, that idea of you get thrown into this and you just
which part when he's auditioning or the actual performance?
Yeah, when he's auditioning. When he's auditioning.
And he went into that dreamlike sequence where he's kind of like floating by himself. And the crazy thing about that is I love that they did that. Well, okay. We're going to get into the cultural aspect of this, and that this is a Disney movie that's surrounded by that's about a black character and all the things that are connected. But this, what I'm about to say, is not necessarily about black people, but more just about creatives. I think all of us have experienced that zone-like state of being, where, and it doesn't happen all the time, but when it does happen, you don't even necessarily, you may not even know that you were in that zone until you get out of it, which is what happened with him. Like when he snapped out of it, then he apologized, where it's like you just get into a groove and you're literally floating and nothing else is around you, and you're just so tapped in to the art, and you're able to, you're not thinking anymore. Now you're just feeling. And whatever the medium is, whether they're piano key, strings, a paintbrush,
if it's a basketball,
whatever, you're just
if it's
in
a
that
comic book.
You're just in that mode, and now you're not thinking anymore. Now you're just reacting, And I loved how they captured that.
So you're actually setting it up to my next point. Joe is going through all those little deaths as an artist.
Yeah.
When you say, okay, I'm doing music, but it's, not in the way I want, or I'm doing this, but it's not the way I want. And then when you finally get into that flow of that potential of that big gig, or, being on that big set, or doing that dream audition, you get into that flow and you get that approval. That is what so many of us dream and live for. And even just kind of skip into the end of the movie where we finally see Joe back in his body and he's playing the gig, and they go through that whole sequence and you can tell he's nailing it. He's killing it the whole show.
Killing it.
And then he says to Angela Bassett's character at the end, now what?
Like I thought this was gonna feel different. I don't feel like what I thought. I've been waiting for this my whole life, and now that I got here, it doesn't feel like I thought it would feel.
chapter 7 of this book that I've been reading. I think I've talked to you about it before. I know personally. I don't know if I talked about it on your podcast the last time I was there. But I was reading this book called Understanding Comics, maybe back in like October, November. I was reading it with my students, but I ended up reading it for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And in chapter 7 of Understanding Comics, the author, Scott McCloud, he sets up like 6 scenarios of different people doing comics or doing the comics industry.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very interesting because he sets up all these scenarios. You have a kid who's an amateur, he can draw, he likes to do it, and then he gets shunned away because it's not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have the next person who probably does the same thing, and instead of walking away from it, they get better, but they don't get good enough to write their own story. And it keeps going. There's people who write their own story, or people who get loved by the critics, or finally, people who are just amazing at it and they're celebrated throughout all the world. And then we got the people who are, that we would compare to like Jack Kirby or Stan Lee. They are the elites. Mm-hmm. But even they ask themselves, okay, but why am I still doing this? And that is the main thing that Soul is trying to capture. I feel like one of the main things. It's not. It doesn't matter if you're great at what you do. That's what Joe's trying to figure. That's what Joe's learning. When he says with his barber, he said at first he says this guy was born to cut hair. No, that wasn't my dream. My dream was this: cutting hair is the medium. He learns that with his mom. He learns that with his own father. He learns that with as he goes on this journey, and as the artist or the athlete or the dad, the mom, whatever it is that we feel like we were born to do, when we do it and we achieve it, and then we find that it's kind of hollow, that's when we kind of have to go back and say, okay, but why are we doing this?
See, and I felt like there, and like, I think without really telling us, they were showing us just how much he was missing as far as like being present, and that was
right
super personified or in after having got the gig. And I forget who he was talking to. Who was he on the phone with? I don't even remember.
That's the thing, they didn't explain that. I wonder who he was talking to.
And he is oblivious to what's going on around him. All he could think about is the fact that he landed this gig. And that very thing is what landed him in. They said not death. They just said it's like in this weird limbo-ish space, which I think was interesting for them to do, because they
you can know why. Because
I think it was a good way of saying, well, he really didn't die, because I think it was it Jerry or
yeah.
They even said, he was like, "Am I dead?" And they were like, "Not really," and it was kind of like, So they kind of made it. They kind of,
know why they did that.
Yes, they kind of used their liberty
to appease all the religions.
Exactly. So we're not saying that Joe Gardner came back from the dead. We're just saying that he's just maybe
he escapes his soul.
Maybe you can
his soul leaves him.
Maybe you can consider it a coma. Maybe he's in a coma, or he's just in some state where now he's able to be outside of his body, but his body's not his body's not buried under the ground or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, and you see that even at the beginning, where you go back to that opening scene where he's in the classroom and he is hearing the class play, and then of course you got like the kid that didn't even bring his trombone, and the other kid whose trombone or whose thing broke or whatever, and then there was the one girl who when it's her solo, and she hits it, and you can see that piques his interest, and then he's going, and then just after that he gets a called out by the principal, pretty much saying, "Hey, we're gonna give you you're full time now, like you're and I see that, and I get it, because it's like, it's not the type of gig that you want, but I know a lot of musicians and artists who would love to be in that spot where maybe they're not in front of a stage playing for like 10,000 people, but they are able to pass on the art, even if it's just to one person. And that process gives them just as much gratification as having your song get played by 1 million people. You know, and and again, going back to that term, seeing that spark in another person and having the ability to foster that. But he missed that because he was so focused on his own big break.
And that is, again, that's kind of even the question that goes back to understanding comics. Why am I doing this? And this is a question that, you know, you and I always talk about with our own art. What's the point? Will life be better? Will someone's life be better if I put out this song? Will someone's life be better if you tell this story on film this way?
Yeah.
Versus, you know, the person who I'm sure are collaborating right now. I'm sure there's 2 people right now who are making the next viral TikTok. But what happens next? Is that something that they're going to keep making someone's life better for? Or is that just something that they're doing and they're oblivious to what's around them? And that's no judgment to anybody in particular. It's just something that, you know, we as artists always have to think about. And when I say artists, I mean anybody that art is, I'm using Scott McCloud's term from Understanding Comics. Art is anything that is done that does not make you, that does not add to human reproduction or does not add to human survival. So art is everything outside of human survival. So that is athletics, that is writing, that is cooking, and learning that. Do we need a cronut? I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm going off on a tangent. But with that being said, there's so many things that just really talk to about that literal existential crisis. And I think because of how the state of the nation was last year, where so many artists got shut down, literally, like, I know I had gigs lined up. I had even the album I put out is not how I wanted it to be recorded or even released. And I can only imagine how many other people were shut down. And the thing that we said we were born to do, we literally can't do it. Mm-hmm. It literally felt, you know, soul crushing. And when you realize that this thing that I'm born to do, I can't do it. So what do you have at the end of the day? Well, you still do have your music. You still do have your zone. And sometimes you have to realize that when you play, when you sing, when you cook, when you make a movie, it's always should be for the benefit of inspiring someone else, not for your own gain. And I think that's what Joe is learning. That's that as he's trying to catch 22. You see what I did there? I didn't do that. Pixar did that.
What that was the what were they called before they? Were they called? I think
they're just called souls. Yeah, they're just called souls.
But they were just given like numbers, which is interesting because then so you have a guy who feels like this is what he's meant to do. This is his purpose in life, and then he ends up being paired with a soul who has no intention of experiencing life on Earth. Which so it's like the exact opposite, and then ending up together on Earth with. I think it was I don't know, was it a her or a him? I guess it was a her. I don't know. They were kind of ambiguous about that, but having 22 be in his body and he was in the cat's body and her finding out these little bitty. It's funny because all the things that he missed out on, she is experiencing in his body. And those are the very things that make her actually want to be there now. Like the small things, like having that same student come to your door talking about how they don't think they want to do this anymore, but saying, just hear this. And then first when she heard, she's like saying, yeah, sure, you should quit and all this stuff. And she's, you know, and then she hears the girl play And then she starts to find the meaning in those small moments, like that, eating pizza, you know, petting the animal, like those little small things that Joe was missing on. Those are the things that she's learning and gaining, and ends up getting, I guess, her final badge or whatever. So, which was, if there's one thing that bothered me, it is still like, why do we have to keep playing like the magical Negro and everything? Like, why?
But it was reversed
Why?
this time.
I get it, but I'm saying, but why do we always have to be the conduit to which someone else understands them? You know what I mean? But I guess black people have always assisted the progression of this country, so I guess it's fitting that something
right.
We gotta be us. But it wasn't quite magical. It wasn't quite magical Negro-y, but I did kind of feel like,
I was gonna say, it's not one of those things. This is the one time where I don't want to say I forgive, but I'm glad that it happened in this way. I'm glad that it was a black guy out of his, that was, how do I say this? I don't think it diminished the black experience in the same way that a Princess and the Frog does. And that's no disrespect to Princess and the Frog. I love my Louisiana heritage.
I would actually, and
you said what?
I would, and I would mostly because even though we get more black skin in this, even though he's not a soul, just like a blue soul for most of the movie, he's actually, even if he's not in his own body, the black body is there. So we see a black person, and we see the ex-student who's now a drummer who linked him, and we see the barbershop, and we see black people, but we really don't really delve deep into the culture. As much as they do in Princess and they do it more in Princess and the Frog. The idea of just the Southern Creole culture, they go heavy into that. We just don't. We just don't get to see black people.
I was going to say, they go heavy. They definitely go heavy into New Orleans culture, but I'm trying to find the best way to say this. My family's not from New Orleans, so forgive me if you're from New Orleans. We're from Tallulah, so argue with your mama. But in Princess and the Frog, you get New Orleans culture, and of course, the New Orleans culture is nothing without black people, but there's so much of it that you can operate in New Orleans anything and be like, oh yeah, there's only one black person here, so it's authentic. Versus in Soul, this is definitely the New York black experience, but it's depicted in a way that's it's very subtle. You catch the glimpses of hip hop. You catch the glimpses of the name drops. The fact that the club that they're playing at is the Blue Note. Or as an homage to the Blue Note. The fact that you got Corey Chestnut playing in the subway. The fact that you got, a barbershop conversation. That is.
Uh-oh. I think we lost him. Well, the first time trying the call in, I got one successful one. And then I got another one where we started talking, and it dropped. Let me see if I can hit him back real quick.
Hello?
Yeah, I don't know what happened.
Yeah, I don't know either. Anyway.
So look, I feel you. I feel you, but we do get the glimpses of it. But I feel like it's more of a New York story than it is a black story.
And I'll give you that too. I think you could definitely make that argument. It definitely is a New York story, but
I felt like it was black. It was passively black, as in like it's jazz, and you really can't tell a story of jazz without black people, and even just the urban city life is so much shaped by the hip hop culture, and most of the things that are popular because either a black person made it or a black person wore it or a black person said it or, in some way influenced it. Maybe LeBron wore it, or this rapper tweeted it or whatever, so.
Yeah, actually, sidebar, that reminds me, I was about to argue with somebody on Reddit about how they said that streetwear came from people in Tokyo. And I was like,
wait, that what did?
Streetwear came from people in Tokyo. And I was like, that's literally New York in the 80s. But anyway.
So those that's just me picking nits with Disney. But it was interesting. How did you feel about how they tried to at least capture the idea of death? What did they call it? It was the great before and the great beyond.
The great before and the great beyond.
Yeah.
I look at it a couple ways. The religion. I like the way it was depicted. I like the way that it was. I know I'm using this in the wrong way, but artistically, I think the very first thing that popped in my mind was, without form and void, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a good nod to where you don't offend various religions, and once you pass, that's a big hurdle to pass. How do you talk about how to live a full life in the wake of a death or something like that, and a literal death, not just a metaphorical death? How do you talk about having a full life in a way that isn't religious, in a way that really just gets to the bare bones and makes you appreciate what living is? So it was smart. It was smart of Disney just to show, like, this is the great beyond. We don't know what it is. You just see people going to it, and it's like a little bug zapper. That's all we know.
Yeah,
that was smart. What we can show you is this thing that we made up called the Great Before, because there's not a lot of religions that talk about that. And it's very interesting to say that, here, this is where you get your personality. Your personality is already born with it. And it's my favorite part is the little infomercial thing that they show at the beginning.
Yeah.
Like, that's because how many times have we seen a kid and we already know, like, oh, you're like this because you were born that way.
Mm-hmm.
It was safe.
I did notice that was Disney kind of playing up that notion that, the I was born this way type thing, and
Yeah.
So it's also kind of hard to process these movies super critically, because I think most of us are like watching them with our kids, and
and I would go to that. This movie was not for kids. I think Pixar
it has enough of a layer to where if you're a kid, like, again, my son is 5 and he's loved watching it over and over and over, but he doesn't understand what Joe is going through and this idea of
right, and that's what all that stuff. Those underlying. I'll put it like this: Pixar, I should say, is definitely on a kick where they know that their audience is getting older.
And exactly,
I think the last movie, Poor Soul, the last Pixar movie I saw was Toy Story 4, and you and I have talked about this. I'm not a person who cries, but lately, ever since my son was born, movies make me cry.
It does.
Specifically Pixar movies.
It happened maybe around like maybe like 28, 29. I don't know what happened, but then now I just have this moment where I could be watching some like flipping commercial. You know what would really get me? Them coming home videos were like.
With like military mom or dad,
and then like I find myself
can't watch them.
Yeah, and then I find myself watching like movies where it's not even a sad scene; it's just like a triumphant scene, and you like rah, and I find myself getting emotional. I'm like, what the hell is happening to me? I don't know what it is. Maybe it is, because I guess when I was 27, 28, that's when I had my son. So I don't know if that was
I think that's what it is. I think it's because we're fathers, and we're like, yeah, that's the goal.
But yeah,
So I'm
I
watching,
think they did play on that. When did Disney Pixar? I could have looked this up. When did Disney Pixar come out?
When did Pixar come out?
Yeah, like when did
1990? The very first, 1995, with Toy Story. So so perfect. So this goes back to my point. So I watched Toy Story when I was 5 years old.
Really fast. That's like a trick question because
Pixar
Pixar came out of Lucasfilm, so that's you can go back to like the 70s. But I think
the first major Pixar film
I believe it was Toy Story, which was 95. So yeah.
Right. So I vividly remember watching Toy Story and just feeling that, even having my brother's 9 years older than me, even hearing my brother and my parents talk about how, it's interesting how the movie is about how the toys get lost. And again, 4 or 5 years old, that's a very weird thing to hold on to. The toys get lost.
Yeah.
So I'm watching Toy Story 4 with Ezra, with my son. He's 3 at the time. And we're in the movie theater, and I won't explain the whole plot, but at the final part where Woody decides that he's going to become a lost toy.
Yeah.
Where he consciously decides that he's going to be a lost toy. I started, tears started running down my eyes.
It's not even that he was going to be a lost toy. It was that he was finally ready to give up. It's funny because it's also identity. It's another thing about identity.
Exactly.
Where he was
exactly
first. And it's funny to see his maturation because in the first movie, he's not just Andy's toy, but he's Andy's number one toy.
Right.
And
his favorite toy.
It's not just about Andy. It's also about him and being given those number one privileges. And then when Buzz comes and Buzz kind of, gets him out of the way, then he kind of starts to understand what it actually means to be a toy. And then in 2, that gets ingrained a little bit more, because he starts to
find his
undergo he starts to undergo some wear, and like his arm gets torn, and then he ends up accidentally on the top shelf, and so he's starting to understand that even a toy has a lifespan, and he then gets
a lifespan. And again, that idea of value.
And then gets that spark in that, wait, there's something greater for me than just being a kid's toy. And that piques his interest. But then he realizes by the end of that movie that, no, there is a greater value in being wanted and needed by a kid. And then that kid grows up.
Right.
And then he starts to understand, okay, so what am I supposed to do here? What is my purpose? Because my purpose was to serve Andy, and now Andy doesn't really play with toys anymore. So what do I do next? And then that's when Andy passes on the toys to Bonnie, and then he kind of realizes that, listen, our job, regardless of whether or not the kids still play with us, is to be here for them. And that's why he chases after Forky, because it doesn't matter if Forky is made out of trash. His kid loves him, so therefore we have to protect him for her. And finally, at the end of the movie, it's almost like when a person retires, because it's like I spent my whole life and my whole career being here for my kid, and now it's time for me to go right off and do me.
Right.
And not living a life. And it's funny because we're talking about a toy doll, but
exactly,
it's about finding out who you are and learning that everything has a time limit. There's always phases. There's seasons for everything, and when one season is over, even though it's sad, it's time to move on. But like you said, when did 4 come out? Was that last year?
It was 2019.
So you're talking about a movie where, when it first came out, we were like 7, 5, 6, 7.
Right.
And then when it ended, we're like 20. We're like 20. We're like almost 30.
28, 30. About to be 30 years old.
So
they've
been growing with us.
Exactly. And that's what Pixar has been doing well. I mean, I remember I've never seen any of the Cars movies except for Cars 3. And that's only because we were on.
It's my favorite Cars movie.
It's great.
I think Cars 3
it's
is the
fantastic.
best movie.
I don't even think I want to watch. I don't want to watch any of the Cars.
Watch one.
It's the same. I'll watch. Fine, I'll watch one. But it's the same thing. It's this idea of getting older. Older.
No, really, watch one. One is good. Two is two's okay. I hate what they did with 2, but watch one. Just watch one and then watch 3 again.
All right, I'll do that.
Yeah.
But just the idea that, with Cars 3, with both the Incredibles movies, it's the idea of you have this identity that no matter what you thought, especially as a man, and I think that's where Pixar is really like they know that we're getting older, especially the boys that grew up with Toy Story and Bugs Life are getting older. And not to say that it's not aimed at women as well, but I think for me personally,
there are specific movies
father,
aimed at women. They have theirs, and they've been doing it now with like Moana and Frozen, and these movies about you also trying to find your own what you're traditionally said that you're supposed to be, but it's about you finding out and blazing your own path, and because I think in both of those stories they're both royalty.
Right.
So it's like there's a typical tradition in that you have to do this and this and that, but it's like, no, we're gonna try to find our own thing out, and we're gonna do our own thing, and so it's all identity.
Right, it's all identity, and it's all that depiction of existentialism.
Yes.
What are you? And just so we can clarify that definition of existentialism, by my definition, the close definition, is that awareness of who you are, what you are, for all of who you are, your celebrations and your faults, the good and the bad.
Yeah. And
then taking all of that, and you have to ask yourself, what do we do next with it? Which is why you and I have this. You know this about me, but your listeners probably don't. I literally joke, but it's the truth. I go through an existential crisis every week, and I don't know. I don't know if that's a thing that needs to be therapized. I don't know yet. But it really is one of those things where when you see humanity, and I'm gonna take it back. I'm gonna tie it all back in. But when you see humanity, when you see your peers, when you see your family members, and when you see your own children get older, when you see other kids get older that used to be babies when you babysat them or whatever, and you realize that life is going to keep going, and you realize that
with or without you,
it doesn't matter how much money you make, it doesn't matter how much influence you have, it doesn't matter how many likes on Instagram you have, it doesn't matter how many followers on Twitter you have. Life is going to keep going with or without you. For every 1 million subscribers that Cardi B has, there are 2 billion that have no idea that she exists. And when you shrink that and put that into your own self, for every 1,000 followers that I have on Instagram, there's 6-7 billion people on this earth who have no idea who I am. But at the end of the day, I'm still going to hold on to like what 22 says in Soul. I'm good at walking. There's going to be musicians who are better than me. There's musicians who are better than me in my phone book. There's people who write better stories than me in my immediate contact list. But I'm going to keep on walking. I'm going to keep on eating pizza. And I'm going to keep on telling my story the way that I know how to, because that's why I'm here. If for no other reason, just to live. Man, that needs to be the soundbite.
I was just thinking, wow, this got really deep.
I mean, you knew who you were going to talk to.
Opened up this podcast talking about Tenet and whether or not Nolan makes, the type of movies that Nolan makes and whatever, and then it ends with, having deep life lesson conversations that spring from a Disney Pixar movie.
And this is where I drop my plug that I'm starting my podcast soon.
And I've been telling you that, I that is interesting in that I think Pixar is aware that its original audience, the generation that it first captured, is older now.
Mm-hmm.
And because it used to be the adults got their nuggets. Like there have always been things in Pixar movies that the kids just were not going to understand, but it wasn't prevalent to the plot, so it didn't matter. But it was a thing to where you didn't understand what was happening when you were 7. And that was fine. That was more for your parent who's watching this movie with you. And then, oh, here's a little joke for the parent to kind of get a little giggle out of. Whereas maybe the kids won't see this. But it's fine if the kids don't see this. Whereas now it's like, okay, well, those kids are older. So let's do something for them because we want to keep that audience. I think they know they're always going to get the kids, but I think they want to hold on to those of us who can't let go of Pixar.
Yeah.
And want to give us the movies that they know we'll understand and then we will connect with, but that we can still watch with our kids. So it's like keeping us involved and yet giving us the opportunity to introduce them to our kids.
Right.
Which is what allows them. I mean, it's a fantastic marketing move.
It's
fantastic.
A fantastic marketing move, but even at the same time, it's a marketing move that again allows us as parents, us who are getting older, to self-analyze.
Yeah.
I think about, with the exception of one being my favorite film of all time, no judgment here, but my favorite film, my comfort film, I should say, is Cats Don't Dance. It's
okay, I'm glad you said
it's my comfort film.
Okay.
So let me not say like it's not the best thing in all of cinema, but it is definitely my comfort film. And I watch it every year. I'll be honest. I'll be frank. We're friends. I forget. Oh shoot! But this is for a podcast. Too late now. When I'm sad, I watch that movie. So anyway, when you look at that, that's definitely a movie where at the end of the day, the whole premise is you never give up on your dreams no matter what. And you look at these other kids movies that we grew up with in the 90s, like Dennis the Menace. Always just be good.
Yeah.
Be yourself, but be good.
There's always a lesson they're trying to.
There's always a very on the nose lesson that's specifically for children. But now, again, like you said, now that we're older, it's kind of one of those things where Pixar is still kind of, I don't want to say holding our hand through life, but they're kind of holding our hand and saying like, hey, you got it, little buddy. You've been doing this for 15 years now. Keep it going. And we all wipe our tears away.
How did they
we
know?
all wipe our tears away as Grandma Coco starts singing "Remember Me."
Exactly. But how did they know that the people who were kids in the theater watching Toy Story were all older people, all struggling with trying to figure out where they are in their lives? So they were like, hey, let's make a movie for that same crowd.
Because they keep raising the prices on Disney passes just for them to be like, nah, y'all ain't getting Disney passes.
Well, it ain't gonna be it's not gonna be no Disney passes no more. You heard about that, right?
Like, hey, look, guys.
Well, because it makes sense.
Look,
it makes sense real quick.
Yeah.
We're talking about Disney passes as a film podcast, but like it makes sense because the question I kept asking is if they open this back up and they make it limited access and that you have to get like a reservation, then it's like, well, what benefit do I get for paying for a monthly membership if I can't go whenever I want?
Right.
So I think they had to do that because it's not fair to say this person's paying every month and then this person who doesn't have a membership, they both have equal opportunity to get a ticket. But it's like, no, I should get some perk. Like I should get first dibs to the park or whatever. So I think they knew that they couldn't do that.
I'm gonna say this and we'll get back to the film because I know this again. It's not a Disney podcast, but you know what the real like for real best way to do Disneyland? You do the tour.
Like what do you mean?
So the tour where the guided tour.
Oh, you get one of the people. Yeah.
That's honestly the best way to do Disneyland.
Yeah, it is.
It's more expensive, but if you got 10
but you get on everything. You get to the front of the line.
You get on everything you want. You get on everything you want. You get
front of the line for everything, and it's
front
not
of the line. You get the discounts, man. I tell you this. By the time we finished the tour, I looked at the man, and he said, "I have to go now." And I looked at him, and I was like, "Yo, no, you're family. You don't leave."
And the crazy thing is, if you go with a big enough party, like you could just split the costs, and it's actually not that crazy of a cost.
No, it evens out. I mean, you got a tip too, but at the same time, it's like,
yeah,
I would for sure do it again.
Okay, I'm ready to end this episode. I'm already on like an hour and a half.
Oh well, you're welcome.
I know I might seem timid. My heart just ain't been in it. I can't trust who's around. You don't have my best interest at heart. At heart. At heart. At heart. Yeah. Yeah. I've been on the edge.